Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. If you're joining us, is that you or me? This is the Aspen City Council work session for March 11th. I got the right day? We are really just picking up the two items that we were discussing last week, charter review and some working norms, working agreements. We are going to actually start off with the charter. I want to finish this off. I think, what we're looking at here is we have some questions, not many, but a few around some of the provisions that are in our charter. And charter change requires a vote of the electorate. I think we covered the elections, and I think what we were looking for is some more information coming back to us about changing the date of our election perhaps, or giving that choice to the electorate. I think there's a couple other items in there. Term limits, we had a brief conversation around, as well as the type of elections that we run, runoff or non-runoff elections. So I think, Diane, I'm wondering if we are contemplating doing public survey on some of these topics. Before we would put choices on the ballot, would we anticipate taking the temperature of the community before we would do that?
I believe that would be at council's discretion.
Okay. I'd recommend we do this the Charter Review Committee, or whatever it was that Sarah called it, and let them decide whether or not specific items should go out for outreach.
Okay, we'll come back to that. So let's just get back into it. I think we left off at Article 4, but we skipped 4 and we went through 5. Initiative and referendum. We wanted to come back to 4 because
there was a lot of meat in it.
Well, it's the discussion around regular meetings. Mostly, it's about our regular meeting schedule. So, section 4.1. Does anybody here, is there any member of council that is interested in looking at changes to our regular meeting schedule? And are other council members interested in a charter commission or not? So Bill already said his support for charter commission. What about regular meetings? Are you contemplating any changes to that? Do you think that there's a better?
I would like to discuss that, but not, thank you for asking, not in the charter, in the rules. So the charter refers to the rules, and I do think that should be a separate, I think that's where it belongs. And so I don't have any comment on the schedule of the regular meetings as it pertains to the charter itself.
Bill, are you referring to? I think it's Ordinance 51 of 2005 that's referenced in here.
I have no idea. It's City Council Rules and Regulations, 2005, yeah.
Yeah, it was a Resolution 51 done in 2005, and those have been amended formally and informally over the years.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, I'd like to move through this. So I'm just really opening it up for next sections. If there's nothing in section 4 at this time that you have questions about, or things that should be referred to either a commission or to the public through a survey, then we will move forward. Yeah, Bill.
4.11, emergency ordinances. I would like to restrict the reasons for emergency ordinances. I would like that discussed by the commission if we go that route.
Other thoughts from council members?
I guess, going back to your first questions, I have no problem with regular meetings the way they are. And currently, no problems with the charter or with emergency ordinances.
Okay.
I think the overall question for me is if we want to establish a task force or a special committee to review the whole charter and look for possible changes.
Okay. And would you suggest that in lieu of going through the rest of the document to highlight things that we would want a charter commission to look at? And would you want to devise a commission and set them to charter review?
I think that any commission or committee would come back to the city council for review, and then the city council would decide to send it to an election to make changes. Is that correct?
That would be a normal process for a charter revision, task force, commission, convention, however you wanted to do it. They could come back with specific changes, change section 4.11 this way. They could come back with an entire rewrite of the charter if you so directed that was an available step for them. You can limit or expand their role as much as you want. It's done any number of different ways by different communities.
And it can also be by initiative, correct? Like the date of the vote was by initiative, wasn't it?
The amendment to the charter can be done by initiative, but that's not what I understand you're talking about.
Understand.
Yeah.
Mayor, I'd like to go through this and go through the whole charter and see what level of concern that we as a council have before I decide if we want to have a special committee or commission to review the whole charter.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I'll concur with Ward's last thought.
Okay. All right. With that, then, let's just go through a little bit more, see if there's any other specific sections that have council interest here. We're going to pick up with section, well, let's finish off. Are there any other questions around section Article 4? We went through initiative and referendum. Did anybody have any outstanding questions regarding that? Article 5, no. Article 6, city administration. Any specific areas of question?
You know, I don't know if this belongs in here or not, but Sam and I were just talking about a specific situation where, regarding RFP responses. And I don't want to come across as wanting or being qualified to evaluate the respondents to every single RFP the city issues. I do have some interest in understanding how the selected proposal compares to non-selected proposals sometimes. I don't know whether that belongs in the charter or not, but given that it's top of mind, I thought I'd mention it here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that would really be,
If I may, that is specifically addressed in the procurement code, be a code amendment rather than a charter amendment. I don't think we address procurement in the charter, but code amendments, you can always review that.
Thanks.
okay. And I think that would start with, sharing your thoughts on that with Sarah and finding out, just if there's process improvements that can be made within what our code already says, so. Okay. Duly noted. We'll move on to Section 7, Legal and Judiciary. Any questions in Section 7, Article 7? Okay, boards and commissions, we're on to Article 8. Were there any questions in this area? We do have a work session scheduled coming up rather soon around board and commission expectations.
I would note, if you don't mind, that there have been a lot of discussions about the limitation on serving more than one board, as well as whether there should be term limits on board members. Those discussions have occurred in the past. There have not been efforts to amend these provisions, but I'm just noting that those come up periodically, and you may want to give that some thought.
I agree. That would be, let's put an asterisk by that. Section 8.2, composition of boards and commissions.
Also related to that section, it says here that the only board where someone does not need to be a qualified elector is the Board of Appeals and Examiners. I don't think that's what we are doing in practice today.
Well, actually,
Mr. Mayor, can I respond to that?
Yes,
The challenge is, while it might appear that way, you have several boards that are not considered permanent boards as a way to manage this charter provision. So in your founding legislation for those other bodies, you have never named them as a permanent body, therefore they're not required to follow this electoral requirement. It's one of the items we'll be bringing to you next week for further discussion.
Got it. So it's that, I mean, while we're doing this, maybe we should codify that. If it's acceptable, and on which boards it's acceptable, at least those that exist today.
I appreciate it. Just for highlighting sake, it's Section 8.2 that has a lot of this language on 3 of the items that we were just talking about, term limits, residency requirement, and the like. So composition of boards and commissions. Section 8.2, we'll put a mark by that and say that, yes, there's interest in maybe cleaning up charter language around that, but we'll hear more next week. I think 8.3 and 8.4, self-explanatory. Article 9, city finances. Any questions on this section? All right.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
the staff
please.
does have recommendations if this goes to Charter Review Commission in this section. There's some unusual things about how we adopt financial policies. Some things are done by, the budget's adopted by resolution rather than by ordinance, for example. There's some things like that staff would recommend for cleanup in this section.
Okay. Thank you for that. Through section 9.14, Article 10.
At 10, I'd be interested in having a discussion about certificates of participation, not, being used as a workaround for some of these other things. I don't have a position on it yet, but I do think someone should have a discussion on that, whether it's us or the commission.
All right, so kind of 10.1, forms of borrowing, where you've got your other opportunities there, but some discussion or a look at COPs for funding. Social local districts. Any other questions in that section 10? Section 11, public utilities and franchises. Jim, did we have some discussion around this?
yes, number of years ago, not that many, there was a charter amendment proposed to change section 11.4, which requires granting of a franchise be approved by the electorate. We do have, I believe, a proposal for approval of the, is it the Holy Cross franchise that that should be approved, renewed. And I think will be a proposal to bring that to the voters in this November. But this is a very unusual provision in a city's charter. I'm not aware of too many other municipalities, if any, in Colorado that require franchises to be approved by the voters. I would also note that when we were considering Comcast franchise agreement, Comcast, a couple of years ago, Comcast asserted that this provision was preempted by federal law, and ultimately we came to the conclusion that it was. So for certain franchises, there are federal preemptions. Holy Cross does not benefit from that preemption. Comcast did.
When you say preemption, do you mean a preemption from going to the electorate for approval?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so 11.4, we'll add that to the list of things that council has interest in being examined.
Jim, could you review some of what franchises the city has that would fall under 11.4?
Well, the ones that come to mind right now are Holy Cross and Source Gas. I don't think and Comcast has a franchise agreement. We entered into an agreement with Comcast. The dispute was whether we could require that to go to the voters under the Federal Communications Act. I don't think there are any others besides Source Gas and Holy Cross that are affected by this, but those two, when they come up, are an issue.
And Holy Cross is for the portions of the city of Aspen that don't get power from the city utility?
Correct. Although their franchise agreement would cross those lines, but their customers are a portion of the city residents. The remainder of the city is under the city's utility.
Seems to me that we should just strike this.
That's what we tried to do. And it didn't pass,
Okay.
which is not surprising. Voters like to, and understandably like to keep their powers, but there are some things that if you're doing a comprehensive look at your charter, you'd probably want to address this item.
Okay, we'll put a mark next to that one as well for an item that needs review. Let's keep moving on. Article 12, taxation. Article 13.
Yeah, one thought on 13.4 here, especially in light of these free market condominiums that we've been purchasing lately, mostly out of the 505 fund. I guess first question would be to Jim is whether he thinks this would apply to the sale of one of those units.
Well, we have always taken the position that they do not come into the definition of public buildings in use for public purposes, that it's a more restrictive purpose. And therefore, this section does not come into play with consideration of those items. There are terms within this section that if, again, you're doing a comprehensive review, you might want to relook at some of the language used here.
Yeah,
I would suggest. I'm sorry?
I think it'd be a good idea.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, as much as someone could argue that a condominium used to house an employee is not a public use, I think just as many people would argue that it is, because it's allowing that person to provide service to the public, so
Those arguments exist, certainly.
I think that warrants some attention.
Other council members?
We can purchase without a public vote,
Yeah.
but we can't sell without a public vote.
Well, again, it depends on the purpose for the purchase, and that's what we're
Yeah,
considering for, residences of employees. We have interpreted this in the past that is not a public purpose that was intended by this original charter provision adoption. But as Councilor Guth has pointed out, that's subject to argument. Nobody's argued that in the past, but doesn't mean it won't happen. But
So we could add language here that clarifies that, basically.
that's
That's what I'm suggesting.
and there may be a couple of other little tweaks to this section too, but that is a very important change that City Attorney's Office would probably recommend.
Thank you. That's section 13.4. Any other items in 13? What is the specially designated spaces, 1313? Why,
This predated me. It was, I'm not exactly sure what this is about and what generated it, but it was something that was adopted in 2001 as a charter amendment. I mean, I was in town, but I wasn't a city resident or voter. So I really have not explored the history of this from Ordinance 34. I don't think it has a lot of impact on our operations, but it is there, and again, if you're doing a comprehensive look, you might want to look at that again. But I really have not done the research as to what generated this.
okay. Sarah, do you have any input on that section 1313? And I guess my question would be, one, would that be removed from the charter, or would there be other specially designated spaces that should be added to this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do think that's a community choice, not a staff-driven choice at all. This is really to protect these two particular locations from infringement from surrounding land uses, and ensuring that the quiet enjoyment of these spaces can still occur. I can't recall exactly what the genesis of this was, but this was at the same time as I recall some other things might have been occurring in Rio Grande Park. That there was some concern about ensuring separation from the sanctuary from the park activities. But we can bring you back additional information. Thank you.
Thank you. Article 14 is really just about the transition and the effective date of this charter. Were there any questions in there? Okay. All right, that is kind of the scope of charter review. So then yes.
Mr. Mayor, I've noticed that the language throughout it, there is some reference to him and her, he and she, and in other language, for example, municipal judges in the council, it specifically only refers to he, and would the council be amenable to staff looking at an update to that language, or?
absolutely.
Sure.
They should.
Okay. That's the charter front to back. There's some certain sections in there that we are interested in having discussion about, or identifying a committee to do some charter review. Sarah, can I get some input from you about what you see as next steps as we dive a little deeper into some of these different sections and articles?
Sure, and again, my apologies that I'm not there with you tonight. my recommendation would be is let's just get you some more information at this point. Let this marinate a little bit for you all. I'm surprised actually by the number of items I've heard you may want looked into, which would give me a little pause about whether the council should do this or whether it should be a community-appointed task force that looks at some of these issues, or a couple different governance models. Let's bring you back information. I can commit to you that we'll bring it back to you, I'm going to say by end of May on these items you've requested, and then you can let us know from there. I'm not trying to target any particular timeline for any amendments. So if the council does have thoughts on that, that would be helpful to hear. But this is just where we're at right now as an exploratory conversation for understanding. And please direct me if I should be moving otherwise.
So we have, obviously, charter changes by the electorate, so we have opportunity in November and then a municipal election next March. So are there any feelings, thoughts from council members about a timeline? Are we interested in putting, getting this work done for potential charter amendments in November?
I think that it's appropriate to have it at a municipal election in March if we decide that we want to make changes.
When it comes to the questions around elections, though, if we were to make changes in November, those would be implementable in the municipal election in March. For example, one would be the change of municipal elections to November. Because if we don't do that, if we did that in March, it would not, if we did it in November, then terms that were voted on in March would be able to be implemented around that election schedule. If we did not do that in November and we waited till March, then it would be 2 years till the first folks would have different terms. Am I thinking of this correctly, Jim?
Yeah, we'll get very complicated, but it probably makes more sense to do it in March if you're going to change the election. Because if you did it in November, you cannot limit the terms that you are serving. You cannot arbitrarily extend it. You need an election to do that. But you're right, if you did it in March, you're really looking at sometime a year or so later before it's actually, or a year plus later.
Yeah, if
before it's
after we go
actually
through this in May, we find that there are substantial changes that need to be made and we want to appoint a task force or a commission, next March gives us some breathing room and some time to affect those changes. And I think it's changes to the charter should be well thought out and discussed before we put it to the electorate. So I think if we're going to make changes, it should be the next municipal election in March. I think November's too soon.
Okay. Sam, any thoughts?
Not on this, no.
Okay.
Tori, I might, given some thought, it would be complicated. There are probably ways to write it to have it effective no matter whether you have the election in November or March, but my reaction initially is that kind of change should take place in March. But I got to give it some thought.
Okay. Sarah, I think that's kind of what you were hoping to hear or looking to find out about some direction. It doesn't sound like we are steamrolling towards November for any questions for the electorate, but we'll wait for our check-in with you in May.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let's move on to our next item. Our next item on our agenda this evening is the working norms, working agreements, and the like. This is something that we've been talking about for years. It's something that doesn't exist in our current rules and regulations or even aside or outside of that document. And the idea here is if you saw your memo, we're just looking at some agreed upon behaviors, both in communication at table, but also with public. And then it goes on beyond what a lot of examples that I've seen are focused on just about working relationships. The items such as not interrupting when a speaker has the floor, and things like that, decorum, if you will. But we have also some need for other guidelines around, easiest example for me to say is around email responses and things like that. We're talking years ago about some sort of tracking methodology, and over the last couple of years that has evolved a little bit, where there is a proposal of sorts from the city manager's office of how best to implement email coordination, if you will, and responses. So with that, what I'm here today really to find out is what is this council looking for, and potentially where would you like it to sit? Is it the kind of thing that you would want as a verbal agreement, as a signed agreement? Is it something that we would like to reside in the rules and regulations, or outside of it, those kind of items? So the board's been working on this for a while. He's been wanting some of this literature in our guiding documents, whatever one it is. And even if it stands alone, it can do that. Like many examples that we have do stand alone. So Ward, I'm just gonna start, open the conversation to you and start talking about what this council wants to see come back to us for working agreements.
Yeah, my work on this predates the last election. It goes back a couple of years anyway. And my desire is that we have working agreements and norms between all members of council that we agree upon, and it transcends councils. Every 2 years we get new council members, and it takes a while for council members to start to mesh together. But if we have some norms that are agreed upon and passed on through our wisdom gained through being on council, that we can pass to new people that come to council, that I think would benefit all of us to have a council that works together. And I think that's what the community wants, is a council that works together with the focus on the common shared goals. And I'm also, Tori, you mentioned it, that it's really important to me to have a full understanding of the email communications. A number of these examples, and Gibson as well, have protocols for who replies to, and so that all of us are on the same page as what's going on with our correspondences with the public and with the staff, and where and what our exposure is on replying and being in violation of open meetings. So those are concerns. Having the email system is in open meetings is really important.
So in our, under discussion in our memo that we all have, a couple of items that the working agreements focus on: agenda setting process, counselor travel and expenditures, council staff relations and communications, use of email, telephone, text, e-communications during public meetings, including during executive sessions, decorum standards, use of language and with each other and the public comment and public hearings, the principles of being tough on issues, not on people, and making sure that we're treating each other with utmost respect, and the process for responding to the constituent emails and public comment addressed to the council. Are these areas where this council is interested in seeing certain systems set up and to get these identified and clarified in documentation? Yep, Bill.
I do think that there's some items in here that are worth spending time on, specifically that how to respond to public emails, I think is a great example of that. I'm not interested in spending a lot of time on talking about decorum standards and professionalism and respect. I think people either have that or they don't. And regardless of whether it's written down, there are going to be situations where certain people don't abide by that regardless. You know, happy to I do think it should reside in the rules and, what is it called? Rules and procedures?
Regulations.
Rules and regulations. Thank you. I don't think this is something I personally want to spend a ton of time on, though. Thanks.
Other input? Sam, do you have any input about, are there certain items on this list that are more interesting to you and things that you want to follow up with?
Mainly just the emails, honestly. The rest of it is all well and good, but I'm not sure. I haven't heard any action items other than the emails as far as like understanding processes goes. But we can talk about decorum as much as we want, but I think the emails is actually something we can be actionable on, and that's why I think it's the greatest focus among this list to me.
Thank you. John, where's your interest lie in the moving some of these topics?
I think we could all benefit from talking about decorum, actually. And yeah, you know, I'm amenable to also working better on email responses. I think, I know I could do better.
Okay. I agree. I think that, you know, most of the organizations that I see and visit with all have some sort of working agreements that they do rest on. So I'm interested in having that conversation at this table. I think it would be a failure of our council to not have some of that in place. And I agree with you, Bill. I don't think it's, they're not rules that are going to be followed all the time because passion gets in there and things happen. But I think that it's important that we all have a basis and a ground, a level ground where we do understand what our goals are and, you know, what we're trying to achieve anyway. You know, I don't think we've really had, I think some clarity around travel and expenditures is always good going forward, just so that people know what to expect. The emails, absolutely. I think that that's important. I think that it's also important for us to understand the use of email, telephone, and communications during public meetings. Just so that, again, so that we have those kind of working agreements. You know, it is inappropriate to be communicating on your device around an issue that is in front of us or being talked at the table. You would want public disclosure of whatever conversations were kind of going on, and I think that's something that we should at least have an agreement around. You know, obviously, for me, decorum standards and the tough on issues, not on people principle are one and the same about how to conduct respectful civil dialogue, even when you disagree or something is extremely important to you. It's important to stick to the issues and not start going at the people that are representing another side. So I think all these things are worthy of us talking about. I've seen the agenda setting process work pretty well for us, so I don't have too many questions there. But again, and I think that is delineated in our rules and regulations from 2005. So I guess my suggestion here is that we would need to be working towards bringing back to this council some working agreements along the lines of both decorum as well as the technicals around emails and public comment responses, as well as the use of those kind of e-communications during public meetings and executive sessions. In order to get those rolling, Sarah, I think, our conversations have really been that this is work that needs to come from the council table, at least on the decorum side of it, and working agreements that we see fit to agree to. But perhaps the other side of it, the email process, is something that your office was working on, helping us out on a process for. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, I'm not sure what process you're referring to for my office regarding email. I believe there was an impasse with the last council. And so none of that work was advanced any further when we showed what was necessary. So I think that is an area that still needs a lot of discussion from the council table. Next week, we are providing you with an overview of what we think is a product to increase transparency in elected official communications with the community, but it won't address what you're talking about regarding who's responding. My instructions to staff has been to go ahead and provide those messages to council, and then we leave it with the five of you to decide if anyone is responding or not responding to that constituent. And then the second part of your question about where to go from here, there's really two routes to go. If the council believes it can facilitate itself to put together a list, then for you to do that in a public meeting or retreat setting. Or secondly, if you don't think you can facilitate that as a group of five, then we can either Diane and I can provide light touch facilitation assistance, or we find you a third-party facilitator. When the council last did this work in 2018, you did use Julia Novak from Denver to assist you with it.
Novak
Thank
Consulting, yeah. Thank you.
I think a good place to start is for us to thoroughly review Ordinance 51 of 205. That's the agreements that we were supposed to be working under now. There's some changes that need to be made, like it says the meetings are on Monday, and when it has to be in, just some cleanup on it. And there's some clarifications and that I need some of the motions and on voting, motions to table and reconsider. I think that's a good place to start. And I think what would be appropriate is that if we, as a group, decide that we want to have some norms and procedures, that we should have. I think a good place to do that would be a public facilitated meeting.
Okay. Trying to find my long-range calendar to see if,
Bob Woodman is scheduled for June 3rd to help with a lot of that procedural piece.
Okay,
that Counselor Houndstein just referred to.
okay.
And so I think that that's a great launching off part for the council's awareness. The challenge I have with this particular resolution from 2005 is I don't know when it's been waived and when it's been not, because sometimes it's been amended by motion. And that could have been 3 councils ago, and it became business practice. And so I do think that there's some merits in cleaning up this process. I've attempted to rewrite this into a new draft form for the council multiple times. And there are some places I get stuck in trying to do that for you, because it's really about how you want to run your meetings. But I'm happy to continue to work on the pieces that are not about how the meeting runs and are more starting points around everything about counselor travel to various things like that, that I can at least get those portions started on for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that sound amenable for everybody?
It does.
All right. June 3rd, I think was the date for that. And I would love to, maybe Sarah, would it be appropriate for us when we talk about council working agreements, just on decorum and respectful dialogue kind of things? Would that be something that we would want to bring back at that June 3rd, like just have a starting place with some of the examples that you've provided us?
I would encourage the council to choose 1 or 2 of them, to just say we're going to work off of those of things you like. If you wish, you could submit to me, if the council all agrees, you could submit to me, just take a few of those, highlight the ones you like, notate the ones you dislike, so I have some starting point of feedback, because otherwise it's really I don't have direction of even which way really to go in a document for you if you're looking for decorum at the table about individual counselor behaviors.
Okay.
That's one I would encourage using a third party for.
Well, I mean, for me, guys, I've seen a couple of examples of them. Even our neighbors at the county over here, the BOCC has one sheet of working agreements. It's maybe a dozen bullet points. I would be comfortable for us to find examples that we want to pursue and then start working on any modifications for Aspen specifically. So for the intents purposes of getting out of this meeting tonight at an early hour, which is nice, is that okay with council members for us to, each one of us, to find an example of what you would, the direction that you would see it going, that kind of thing?
Well, I should note that Sarah and team did provide several examples of this that were good. Yeah, I don't know how we're going to merge these examples of things that you're interested in.
So if you pick 1 or 2 of the examples that you have, I'm trying to get to mine, that we'll start, looking at it's going to come back to us to say, is this the language that you agree upon or would like in this kind of working agreement document? So if all of us just pick ones that you're looking at that you said, I like this, you've got gypsum here in Eagle County. Like I said, the example that I've seen most recently was the BOCC. So anyway, the point being, if you'll just direct what you've seen in here that you're like, yeah, something like that is what I'm looking for. Sarah can do the work of kind of coalescing those into one that fits our needs best.
Okay, I think my efforts will be focused on updates to the rules and regulations, around some of the topics I've brought up both tonight and at the last work session, and less on the decorum side of things, but I'm happy to make notes on that and send them around
Thank you.
personally.
That'd be great. All right, well, we don't need to, you don't need to do it today or tonight. We can get these to Sarah as items that you're kind of looking for this direction to go. Great? Good, Sam? Mm-hmm. Okay. Sarah, is that okay with you?
So what I understand is staff's next steps is that we're gonna sit tight. We're not really gonna do anything on the staff side until we hear from the 5 of you with your individual comments.
Yeah, I think we use you as a clearinghouse, that we submit to you what our ideas are, is that it? And I think Bill made reference to the rules, and I think that going back to the council rules and regulations, ordinance 51 of 2005 is where this needs to be fit in.
Okay. Then it sounds like, yes, we're going, yes, Sarah, you're going to sit tight. It sounds like council members would like the opportunity to go over the rules and regulations as they are from June 2005, as well as some other working agreements, and get that information to you, and then you can figure out best process from there.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, with that, those are 2 items that we wanted to get done today. Thank you, guys. That is our agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, GrassRoots.